Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Nicholas Lamar Soutter. We have a couple of different things to cover. Just as a recap, as those of you who watched yesterday's show know, there has been rioting and looting in Minnesota, and Governor Tim Walz has now activated the National Guard in order to attempt to restore order. We will have some more footage from that in a few minutes, and we can update you on that. Things seem to have calmed down a bit right now, but it does look like, unfortunately, they're expecting more trouble tonight, and we will keep everybody apprised as more information comes out about that. However, we have just become aware of a Pennsylvania Democratic representative, Brian Sims, who has posted on Facebook Live. He did a rant about 5 hours ago on Facebook Live in which he accuses his fellow lawmakers, particularly those on the Republican side, of hiding their positive COVID status in order to continue to legislate and in order to ostensibly conceal the severity of the COVID-19, the infectious nature of COVID-19, and that they were in fact quarantining during their infective status, thereby protecting people they know, but not notifying other members of the legislature. So what we will do now is we will play this video. I think it speaks for itself. So without further ado, this is Pennsylvania Democratic Representative Brian Sims.
I think this is on. Hi, everybody. Representative Brian Sims here. I am in my office in the House of Representatives. I just walked back here from the House floor. Today has been one of those kinds of days where I hope in the years to come, the decades to come after I finish serving in elected office, that I hope I'm able to sort of put out of my memory. I sort of don't exactly know where to begin. This morning, apparently, House Democratic leadership learned that for as much as a week, perhaps longer, that House Republican leadership knew that at least one of their members had tested positive for COVID-19, that other members who'd been exposed to him would eventually go on quarantine, but they didn't go on quarantine until they were done serving alongside us, especially those of us that serve on the state government committee. So for those of you that know, the Pennsylvania House of Representatives under our gerrymandered Republican leadership has been perhaps the most active state legislature in the entire country. And during that time period, during the entire COVID-19 crisis, the state government committee has been the place where all of these fucked up bills to pretend that it is safe to go back to work have been going. And every single day of this crisis, the state government committee in Pennsylvania has met so that their members could line up one after one after one and explain that it was safe to go back to work. It was safe to go back to race car driving or dog grooming or getting your hair cut. Meanwhile, what we're learning is that during that time period, they were testing positive. They were notifying one another and they didn't notify us. I just spent the better part of the last 11 weeks sitting across a room from people who would eventually test positive and decided not to tell us. They did do some kind of quarantine. They did do some kind of contact tracing, they, I guess, being Republican leadership. Russ Diamond, apparently, many of you know as the person that has led the charge to open up the legislature, screaming every single day in committee about how we were safe and how there wasn't a risk, has apparently been quarantining himself for weeks. Of course, he didn't explain that to any of us when he was in committee, talking with us, or walking up and down the aisles, or bumping into us, or letting us hold the door open for him. I kind of don't even know where to begin. Let me tell you a little bit about why this is so fucking dangerous. First of all, let's start with the Democratic chairman of my committee, Kevin Boyle. Kevin Boyle's got 2 young children. Kevin Boyle every single day comes up to this Capitol and then goes home to his wife and kids, his 2 young kids, and nobody decided to tell him that it was okay for his kid to be exposed, but not for these members. I know one of the members put out a statement saying, I was looking out for my family. You were exposing our families. One of the members of state government has a wife who is immunocompromised. Let me tell you why it matters to me. Fucking A. Let me tell you why it matters to me. I wasn't planning on talking about this until after the election, but in January, I donated a kidney. I secretly donated a kidney to somebody in my city, somebody who lives blocks away from me who was dying of renal failure. I'm so proud of having to do it, but it was not for public consumption. It was for my friends and for my family and for my staff. And every single day that our gerrymandered Republican leadership has been calling us up into this building so they could pass these ridiculous bills pretending that it was safe to be out there, they were covering up that it wasn't safe. You have no idea how the people around you are impacted, and that's why it's so important to notify people. So here's what needs to happen. Here's what I think needs to happen. First of all, Mike Turzai, the Speaker of the House, needs to resign. And any member of leadership that has known what was going on, any member of Republican leadership that knew that members were testing positive, that other members were being quarantined, and did not tell those of us who were exposed to those members, needs to be investigated by the Attorney General. And I think that there needs to be prosecutions. Holy shit, exposing all of us up here to this crap while covering up what was going on, while simultaneously telling families that it was safe to be outside, that it was safe to be interacting with other people, while you were testing positive, while you were quarantining the people around you, while you were doing contact tracing, and not notifying a single Democratic member who has to show up here every single day for this crap. There is no legislature in the country that has met as much as the Pennsylvania legislature, and there is no committee that has met in this state legislature as much as the state government committee. And we have had to listen to this succession of members coming before us, telling us that this was fake, that this wasn't real, that there was no risks, all the while knowing that they were testing positive and withholding that from us. So I've got my eyes right now on the Republican legislature, and there's a bunch of things that I want. I want a full-blown investigation by the Attorney General. Every single member of Republican leadership that knew that this was happening, I want an investigation of what kind of contact tracing that they did. The entire Democratic House of Representatives today had to jump on a call with the Secretary of Health to figure out if it was safe for us to go back to our families. I'm in a building right now surrounded by members that can't go see their kids, that are having to call their husbands, having to call their wives and saying, honey, I might have exposed you and everybody I love in this world because one of my colleagues tested positive, but he was protecting his family, but not protecting mine, and Republican leadership protected him. I want a full-blown investigation by the Secretary of Health. I need to know if it's safe for us to be back in this building. This building needs to be scrubbed top to bottom. Holy shit. I can't believe that this is happening to me at work today. I cannot believe that this is what we are going through. People always say the parties are the same, or it doesn't matter this party or that party. You know what the difference is? The difference is values and credibility. And every single day that I've showed up at this gerrymandered legislature, I knew that the Republican leadership that was out there was fake and it was false and it was looking out for themselves. But I never, ever knew that the Republican leadership of this state would put so many of us at risk for partisanship to cover up a lie. And that lie is that we're all safe from COVID. That lie is that social distancing isn't important. One of these people, Russ Diamond walked around the House floor every single day without a mask on. Just a little bit ago, I was on the House floor, and at one point, only 4 Republican members had their masks on. Holy shit. It's not your business to put my life at risk. It's not your business to put the lives of the children of our members at risk, of the spouses of our members at risk. Right now, the Republican caucus needs to ensure that every single member in this building is tested, and our staff, and it needs to be done at the cost of the Republican caucus. There are hundreds of people that have to show up every single day that Republican leadership decides that they want to show up here and do something bullshit like this. Their staffs have to show up. They are hardworking Pennsylvanians, and now they've been exposed to a global pandemic that you have covered up and lied about. Every single member of this building needs to be tested. Every single staff member in this building needs to be tested. It needs to be done immediately. It needs to be paid for by the Republican caucus. This building needs to be shut down until there are full health and legal investigations. Mike Turzai, you need to resign. Shame on you. For those of you that don't know, Mike Turzai is the Republican Speaker of the House, one of the people that has joined in going after the Secretary of Health, one of the most qualified people in this country to deal with COVID-19, and yet every single day you have perpetuated the lie that it was safe for Pennsylvanians to be outside, that it was safe for Pennsylvanians to interact with each other. Every single day you have dragged us to this legislature so that you could go industry by industry by industry and explain how it was safe. Even using the House as an example, I sat in state government a week ago with one of these members while it was explained to us that the room we were in was the perfect example of how safe it could be. I didn't donate my kidney to save somebody's life so that I could die at the hands of Republicans who are being callous liars. My colleagues' children, my colleagues' families, those are so much more important than any lie. Those are so much more important than any cover-up, and yet here we are right now. How dare you? How dare you put our lives at risk? How dare you put our families at risk and pretend that it was about looking out for your own? We know you're looking out for your own. This is what gerrymandered leadership in Pennsylvania looks like. So, Mr. Speaker, all eyes on you. Are you going to continue to lie about your cover-up? Are you going to continue to put lives at risk? Are you going to continue to think that advancing the interests of the big banks and the big business whose pocket you're in is more important than saving lives? Well, you don't get my fucking life. My life belongs to me. It does not belong to you. You had no business putting me and my friends and my colleagues at risk in the way that you have. You're a scoundrel, if there ever was one, Mike Turzai. You have no business in government. You have no business in the private sector. I believe that you should be investigated. I believe that you should be prosecuted. And I believe that you should be in jail. How dare you? So I'll continue to report back. I'll continue to not mince my words. I'm a Democratic member of the Pennsylvania House who just found out that my Republican leadership, in a cover-up to make sure that we didn't know that COVID-19 had breached the House of Representatives, was lying to its members and covering up from its members about that. The only way we found out is because a reporter asked one of our members, and our members got it out of their leadership. You belong in jail. Shame on you, and thank you to everybody that is asking how we're doing and what's going on. The answer is we don't know. The answer is a whole bunch of my colleagues are on the phone right now with their loved ones saying, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for what I might have done to you and not known that I did it. And it was Mike Turzai that did it. It was Republican leadership that did it. It was Russ Diamond that did it every single day, slamming a Secretary of Health for saying that it was risky for us to be together every single day, walking around this house without a mask. And where are you right now? You're in quarantine because you might be spreading a deadly disease to all of us and our families. This is shameful. This is disgusting. This is the height of Republican hypocrisy. This is what happens when Republicans gerrymander a state. This is what happens when Republicans take control. Fuck, I've spent so much of my time here trying to see beyond the blind, disgusting partisanship, and now that partisanship has grown deadly. Deadly. So no, Mike Turzai, no Pennsylvania Republicans, no to the Pennsylvania House. I see you. We see you. My life doesn't belong to you. The lives of my colleagues don't belong to you. The lives of their friends, their family, their spouses don't belong to you. And you know what? The lives of the constituents of your colleagues who you covered up for don't belong to you either. Right now, you should be using your money, your resources to study every single thing that those members did with your blessing, and you should be reaching out to every single one of those families, every single one of those Pennsylvanians, making sure they're safe, making sure they're healthy, but you're not. You're too busy. Never, ever, ever thought I would find myself in government. Never thought I would find myself in a place where partisanship became deadly. I never want to hear that the parties are the same. I never want to hear that everybody's doing this stuff and it's just a matter of who gets what or who.
All right. I apologize. I'm not sure if either we didn't have the complete video there. I do know. So one interesting thing about that video, he was broadcasting that from his office, and his office in the Pennsylvania legislature, and at roughly 11 minutes in, the internet was cut, or there was, I shouldn't say it was cut, it cut out. He lost internet connection, and the video ends. So that was Pennsylvania State Representative Brian Sims, upon having learned earlier today that at least one member of the of the Republican caucus in the Pennsylvania state legislature had tested positive for COVID and was in fact in quarantine, except when they were going to the legislature to work and to vote and to pass legislation that was undermining the state's response to the global pandemic. He learned about it and had this reaction. He went to Facebook Live broadcast for about 11 minutes before his internet connection was lost. I think what's worth noting here, a couple of things. The White House revised its updated figures for how many Americans were going to die total as a result of COVID-19 to 100,000. We exceeded that number yesterday. The current projections are roughly 150 to 175,000 by mid to late August. Those numbers are not assuming a new what we're calling ostensibly a second wave and or a second peak. Those are two different things. A second peak will almost certainly occur. This peak will be where our systems are most vulnerable to being overwhelmed. Currently, the general thinking is that a second peak will occur nationwide when the regular flu combines with COVID-19 to increase the number of cases of people who are sick and in need of hospitalization, and we will be seeing possibly a situation nationwide such as New York had roughly 1 month ago. There are a great many people who have said that this isn't serious. President Donald Trump has been among them, and he has been flippantly suggesting that people consider possibly ingesting or using household cleaners, or at least that be looked into. He has suggested that people take hydrochloroquine, a extraordinarily toxic medication that could not pass FDA approval today if it had to reapply, and he has suggested, and for which there's no evidence that it has any efficacy whatsoever, and at this point, 2 separate studies that have found it between doubles or triples your chance of dying if you take it while infected with COVID. The reason for this is because it taxes your system so badly. To a number of people who have had strong immune systems, they're perfectly healthy people, COVID has actually been fatal. Nobody knows why. There was a rather poignant video of a man who was a bodybuilder in excellent shape who was decimated by this disease. But for the most part, if you are healthy, chances are very good you're going to be okay. The problem is there are a number of people who are either immunocompromised, who have some other medical condition, or who, through no fault of their own, are in circumstances that make them particularly vulnerable. Mr. Sims had donated a kidney earlier this year. He did so because he felt it was the right thing to do and because he wanted to save a human life. He had decided to keep that confidential until after the election. He did not want this to be politicized. But by having donated a kidney, he is now in the high-risk category. If he gets this, he is at a much greater chance for dying as a result. And again, the claims that he is making at this point is that he was notified today that at least one member of the Republican Party in the Pennsylvania state legislature has been quarantining because he's been infected and tested positive for COVID-19, but has been violating quarantine to come into work. He has been, he hasn't told anyone. He has been engaging with people in close proximity. He has not been wearing a mask, and we here at In Time would like to remind you that you wear the mask not to protect yourself. You wear the mask to protect others, because if you are infected, and you can be infected in some cases for as long as 2 weeks without showing any symptoms and testing negative for COVID-19, while you are still infected and contagious up to 2 weeks. The reason you have the mask is because it drastically reduces the likelihood that you will infect other people. It doesn't make it impossible, but it drastically reduces it. This representative was coming into the legislature without a mask, without taking any precautions, and without notifying anybody that he was positive. According to Mr. Sims, several other people in the legislature knew that he was infected and did nothing about it. And I believe he implied that there may be at least a few other people who may be infected. I'll probably have to listen to that again. As soon as he found out, he went down to his office and started a Facebook live stream. The stream lasted for about 11 minutes before the internet dropped for some reason. That is the stream. It's a little hard to know what to say about something like this. Medical privacy is extraordinarily important, and I think people who have medical conditions have every single right, to keep that private. I wish we didn't have to. I wish we lived in a society where people weren't stigmatized for their conditions, whatever they are. But that's not where we live. That is absolutely, irrefutably not the world we live in. That's why you have a right to privacy. But that right ends at the point at which you are endangering other people's lives. Right now, the best estimate for the mortality rate of COVID is 3.7%. And if 20% of Americans get this disease, 20%, and universally it's accepted this will continue at least until we have 70%. But if 20% get it, you are looking at 2 million American deaths. 2 million American deaths. To suggest that it's okay to interact with other people knowing that you have become a weapon, and that some of the people, because of their own privacy, because they haven't maybe told their colleagues that they are immunocompromised, because they haven't revealed all of the nuances of their own conditions, which may make them particularly vulnerable to this. By not notifying people, you are endangering their lives. Now, I don't think you should actually have to notify people. You shouldn't. But then stay home and stay in quarantine. And apparently, this person, who I don't know if it was the head of the Republican legislature, or I believe what he was saying was the head of the Republican caucus, knew in the legislature, and I think it was another person who he's speaking rather quickly there. At any rate, the man was actually in quarantine and then violating it to come into work, and that he was spending in time with colleagues, Republican and Democrat alike. However, the Republicans knew. The Democrats did not. That's staggeringly unethical, possibly illegal. I do know there have been cases of people who have been prosecuted for having tested positive for AIDS, and this was especially when AIDS was much more of the death sentence than it is now, but who had tested positive for AIDS, who were deliberately infecting other people. Whether or not he was deliberate is hard to say. I will say the notion that he was in there and that he knew he was contagious and that he was already acting unethically and that it didn't cross his mind maybe to step a little closer to his Democratic colleagues, given that he was already it's such staggering violation of ethics as it is for having come out there. I don't think it's difficult to suggest that possibly it came across his mind to get a little closer to his Democratic colleagues, maybe kneecap them a little bit and take them out of the equation for a month or two, which can certainly happen with COVID. Problem is, he doesn't know if they can survive it. He doesn't know. And the COVID projection rates are already going up. I think there's very good evidence now, although the World Health Organization, I believe, has not yet adjusted the mortality rates. I think that there's very good reason to believe that the mortality rates are much higher. We know it is causing stroke. We know it is causing a number of permanent respiratory issues in a number of people. This is not a joke, and this is not a political football, which unfortunately our president does not seem to understand. And the behavior is reflected by the leadership. When people see him not taking this seriously, they don't take it seriously. You want to reopen in violation of the CDC, World Health Organization, and basically every scientist on the planet, their recommendations. I suppose you can do that. Um, but at a minimum, then admit, which he's actually for the most part been willing to do, but admit that you're doing it because you think the economy is more important than the lives that are going to be saved. And there are actually legit arguments for that. One such argument is, look, you're going to lose the same number of lives roughly anyway, so why does it matter when you open? Well, it's about flattening the curve and all these other things that we've talked about a million times. But I can see you can actually get to that argument. But the idea that you would deliberately go into knowing you're infected and go and risk other people's lives, people who again, in his case, he donated a kidney. And the reason he didn't tell anyone was because he didn't want it turned into a political football. So it's staggering. We got the video. We decided to air that, and I'm sure that there will be fallout from it. But I think that for the most part, despite me speaking on it for 10 or 15 minutes, that speaks pretty much for itself. So the only other thing I'd really like to hit on briefly before we wrap up, and I do want to thank you all for joining us. I had said this earlier at the top of the show, and I just want to get back into this because I said I would have some footage from it. So there has been rioting in Minneapolis, and it was over the death of George Floyd, who was killed by four police officers, one who, and we showed a screenshot of it yesterday, an officer who was sticking his knee onto Floyd's throat. He did so for 8 minutes until Mr. Floyd passed out and was not responsive, and then he continued with his knee on the man's throat for another 11 minutes. And then by the time first responders showed up, he was non-responsive, and he was brought to the hospital and pronounced dead. So we did cover that, and we covered some of the rioting. But one of the things I did want to mention is that in general, we don't always have a chance to do a deep dive on these issues, and we did say that there were a lot of details that we didn't have at that point. We didn't know, and we still don't. we in time we cover breaking news, and we cover culture and politics, and we cover a whole bunch of other stuff. But what I do want to do is I want to recommend to everyone here. There is a man. His name is Nate Brody. He is an attorney. He is a former New York City prosecutor, and he is also a former police officer. This makes him eminently qualified to discuss exactly this topic because he's actually at the intersection of all of it. Law enforcement. He's literally lived the situation that those men were in. So he did an excellent video on it. We will be dropping a link to that video in the live chat. So, we did the breaking coverage, but Mr. Brody, who has also just been a spectacular supporter of the show, and we do appreciate it, but he also just did really quite a good video on it. He did that, I think, yesterday. So if you want to understand more about that, go to that video. We will be covering any further consequences if the right now the National Guard has been activated, and you can see there some of the damage. Last night we covered, or actually really this morning, we had video footage of the rioters attacking police officers, throwing rocks, actually throwing fireworks at looters throwing fireworks at police officers. So it's pretty volatile. We do have, as I said earlier, we have someone, we expect to have them on tonight to discuss it, who actually lives in the 3rd Precinct and has been hearing and seeing and smelling all of this. So we look forward to carrying that. We look forward to updating you guys more. We also do have Dr. Richard Carrier will be on to discuss, next week he'll be on to discuss Christianity's influence on science. We have a few other guests that we're looking forward to coming up. But in the meantime, thank you all for joining us, and thank you for stopping by.